Hi, I'm Geoff Feder, and I'm a knife expert. Awesome, exquisite. This is a work of art. This thing blows my mind. Well, it looks like we have paring knives. Paring knives are great little knives. They're short, so they're great for taking off the tops of vegetables. If you're peeling something, they're great, and they're just a great all-around workhorse. Generally speaking, they're on the lighter side. They're smaller. When we look at these knives, the first thing I notice is side A has what's called an integral bolster. That means the bolster, this top part, is flowing out into the blade. So the bolster is actually a piece of the steel. B has a little black knob. Your last few inches of the knife ain't gonna make it to the cutting board. I noticed it's got a plastic handle. It's a little bit shorter. The heel is very short. One of the great things about a paring knife is you can use it into your hand. You're holding it towards yourself instead of going away or going against the board. So if you have a heel, sometimes that'll be a little bit more dangerous when you're, doing your little fiddling around with all sorts of vegetables. I need to take a look at these a little bit closer. I'm gonna pick them up. So when I look at the construction of this knife, I notice a few things that would make this knife a little bit more expensive. This knife has a complete and full tang. That means you see the entire profile of the knife in steel. That's called full tang, with an integral bolster. So when they start to finish this knife after heat treatment, they're going to thin it out and actually feather in this portion of the bolster that would tell me that they're using different types of grinding machines in order to make that transition very effortless. This knife has a lot of processes that it goes through before you get to this point, including sanding of the handle scales and cleaning up and polishing all those rivets. This thing doesn't make itself. There's a lot of work that goes into these things. Let's take a look at B. When I pick this up, I notice it's very, very light. I also notice that I don't see any exposed tang in the handle. So I would think that this is what's referred to as a hidden tang or partial tang. That means that this knife, when it's cut out or stamped out, it actually tapers down here and it's embedded in this handle. This plastic handle has a little bit of give in here. So I'm imagining that it's poured in. This is a poured on handle. I would say because there's less production, there's no rivets, there's no exposed tangs, there's not a whole lot of grinding or sanding, I would say that this is a little bit less expensive of a knife. Generally speaking, you don't need paring knives to be razor blades, because a lot of times when you're using them into yourself to stop at your thumb. So what you're looking for is something light, something easy to use, something easy to replace, and something that's not going to cut your finger off right off the bat. Based on everything I've said, I'm assuming that A is a little bit more expensive than B, but in order to do that, we're gonna have to confirm and look at the prices. Yeah, that's more. So in summary, knife B is a great knife to have in your knife bag. It's a great knife to have in your home. It's a great knife that you don't have to worry about if it gets lost, if it gets stolen, or you break it, or you stick it in the dishwasher, you shouldn't do. A is gonna give you a little bit more comfort in your hand. It's gonna be a little bit easier to maintain. You might wanna go with A. All right, we have some chef knives here. We know that these are chef knives because they're a little bit longer, they have a little bit more heel. When you ask for an 8-inch chef's knife or a 10-inch chef's knife or a 9-inch chef's knife, you're actually measuring from the heel to the tip. It's just the blade. So that's kind of important right off the bat. One thing I will say about knife A that strikes me immediately, I believe that this knife has a slight hollow grind, the first half an inch from the edge towards the spine. When I look at knife B, it's a different knife completely. It's a little bit longer. It has a little bit more heel than knife A. It also has a few different features. One is it has brass pins and a decorative pin in the middle. There's also a brass bolster. Brass also tells me that this most likely is a carbon steel, and it's verified by saying carbon steel on the top. All right, you have two different styles of steel that you can use, and each one has its pros and its cons. Carbon steel holds a great edge. It's very easy to sharpen. What you're losing with the carbon steel is it has the opportunity to patina. That means when you're cutting vegetables with a lot of acid, like onions, or you're cutting lemons, or using anything with a lot of liquid, what's gonna happen is there's nothing in the steel that's preventing it from patinaing and rusting. Stainless steel has chromium in it, and what the chromium does is it prevents the patinaing, it prevents the oxidation. The funny thing about stainless is it's called stainless. It's not stain never. So if you were to leave this in a bucket of water, ultimately it will rust. To figure out a little bit more about these knives, I really like to pick them up. The first thing I notice, this grind is 1/2 inch from the edge. And when I look at it, I definitely see that these are definitely concave. And what the hollow grind does, it makes up for this distance, this 1/2 inch distance, by kind of coming inside and making the edge a little bit on the thinner side. So that makes this knife a little bit better geometry at that 1/2 inch versus if the blade was ground from the spine to the edge. When I see how flexible it is, and I see the fact that the whole spine is one length, it seems like there's a lot of costs cut. It doesn't make it a bad knife. Let's pick up B and see a little bit more about this knife. I notice this is a full tang knife. It actually has a distal taper, meaning that it tapers from the tip of the bolster all the way to the tip. That means you're getting a little bit more performance at the front. It's really great for cutting onions, and then having a thicker heel is great for kind of going through something harder. When I look at the grind of this knife, the grind goes from the spine of the knife all the way to the tip. So this is what we refer to as a full flat grind. So that means the machine not only tapered it this way, but it tapered it completely this way. It's different from this one in terms of the food release. When you're cutting it, you're gonna have a little bit more release of the food off your blade versus the full flat grind, which food will tend to stick to the blade. This hollow grind allows it to kind of just slide off a little bit easier, if that's what you want. Based on the construction of both, I would say that B is more expensive than A, and there's really only one way to find out. Yeah, it's a big one. For $4, you can't go wrong with a knife like that. $4 that's a good buy. You could have this if you're in a small kitchen or if you don't really want to deal with knives, there's nothing wrong with that knife. Versus B, this is an enthusiast knife. This is a knife for someone who's wanting to learn how to cook or get better. This knife also has an opportunity to be an heirloom. It's a beautiful knife. If you learn how to sharpen it, if you learn how to maintain it, this is something you could pass along to your family. It's a great knife as a keepsake. So we have a pair of boning knives. These boning knives are both totally different, but there's a lot of similarities. Boning knives tend to be something that when you're holding them, you're actually not using them against a cutting board. You're actually holding them, well, butcher maybe hanging a piece of meat and you're actually holding it in the air, or you're boning out a chicken. You're never really resting it against anything. The qualities that you're looking for in a boning knife is you want to make sure that it's nice and thin. It doesn't need to be too long. 6 inches, 7 inches is all you really need for a boning knife. You want it to be a little bit stiff, but looking at these, they might be a little bit more flexible. Knife B, I see a molded grip. It looks like it has a lot more comfortability and slip resistance. You can see that the part of the finger guard here is for protection. So depending on how you're holding the knife, you're able to be a little bit more confident in how it's in your hand. When I look at this knife, I see more designs to be ergonomic. It might feel more comfortable in your hand, but we'll see. I have to put it in my hand first. So when I hold this knife, it feels a little bit heavy on the handle side, which is good. It's gonna be a little bit easier to manipulate when you're cutting through chickens or you're cutting through bones. This is more like what a surgeon would use. You want something kind of like a scalpel. We're gonna have to take a look at B to see what's going on with this. So right off the bat, it automatically feels a lot lighter. And one of the reasons why is because this is a hidden tang construction. It's either molded onto this handle or the handle's molded onto the knife. What you end up with is something a little bit more slip resistant. This actually might be a knife that you would have in a professional environment where you want to make sure that if you're processing a lot of meat, you don't really want to have any slippage. So comparing these two knives, this has a lot less steel in it, which might affect the cost. The handle doesn't have as much elegance. It doesn't have as much ornamentation. So I'm imagining that makes this a little bit of a less expensive knife. I would definitely see this as something that would be more of a workhorse than this knife. And with that said, I would tend to think that A is a little bit more expensive than B. Let's see. Substantially. Well, you know, these things happen. This is 4 times more expensive than this one for the ornamentation. This is the kind of knife you see on one of those stoves that you don't ever really use. They're a little bit more sculptural. I think that the design is a little bit more fussy than a professional would use. Because A has an integral bolster and an integral butt, there is more work involved, more craftsmanship, getting to the point where you can actually put the scales in between the butt and the integral bolster. I think there's a lot more going on in this that would make this more expensive. There's a lot more processes. There's a lot more rivets, sanding. This might be the knife that I would prefer, where I'm using it all day long to process meat, to hold it in a position where I feel comfortable and confident that it's not gonna slip in my hand. You're gonna keep sharpening it. You're gonna be able to get it to the point where it looks like a toothpick, and you're gonna throw it out and get another one. So we have here 2 serrated knives. Brought a Damascus knife. All right, that's where we're going. It is an amazing knife. It's kind of stunning a little bit. A is an incredible Damascus integral knife. I'm gonna explain what Damascus is. You can see all this pattern. What that is pattern welded steel, when you take alternating pieces of high carbon steel and high nickel steel, and then you stack them up. And then what you do is you put them in a forge, you get them screaming hot, and then you, with power, a power hammer or a press, you're actually forging them and fusing them into something that you can, a usable billet. Once your knife is ground and sanded and finished, what you do is you dip the knife into ferric chloride acid, and what the ferric chloride does is it actually etches, it eats the high carbon steel, and it leaves the high nickel steel alone. So what you end up with is a specific type of pattern. So this would be referred to as random pattern Damascus. There's all sorts of patterns. You can see the beautiful little topographical design of the silver being the high nickel and then the darker stuff being a high carbon. When you're forging this knife, what happens is your material is on the thicker side and then it's squished in. So this Damascus actually looks like it's flowing out of the bolster. This thing is unbelievable. Can't believe it. All right, yeah, let's get away from that one for a second. So what we have here is more of a classic offset serrated knife. The serrations are not like saw teeth. They're more like scallops. And what that's gonna do is you're gonna be able to do a little bit more than just bread. Usually when you see those sharp saw-like teeth, that's really for cutting. That's for like sawing through your tough bread. These offset serrated are meant to be used for not only bread, but for chicken, for prepping. What this knife is, it's similar to a bread knife, but it has this shape. Both knives allow you to clear your knuckles. You'll notice that the handle is a little bit perched out from the line of the serrations, which is going to allow you to work against your cutting board a little bit easier. You have a little bit more versatility with this style of knife than a standard bread knife. I'm going to lose my mind if I can't pick up this knife. So basically, this knife here is exquisite. It's super light. In the bolster, there's a stick that's forged into the blade that goes all the way through the blade. And the reason why I know that is because there's a brass fitting on the back. So what this tells me is it's connected to the tang to make sure that it's sitting in place in this handle. This is not a very aggressive serration. This is gonna be a lot less sawing and a lot more slicing. This thing is going to move through anything like it's gonna be ridiculous. I don't know, hot knife through butter. I mean, it's just extraordinary. I'm like losing my mind a little bit. Let's just take a look at this offset serrated. This knife is super light. Part of the reason why it's so light is because there's not a full tang. It's a partial tang, so there's not as much material in the knife. It's very structurally sound. It feels good in my hand. I would say that this is a good quality knife. I don't think it's as expensive as the first one, but it's a very perfectly fine, excellent knife that you could bring with you to a kitchen. If you lost it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Looking at both these knives, they're perfectly good knives. There is just no way that this is more expensive. The only way we can really find out is, obviously, we need to look at the price. Come on, of course. Please. This knife is the perfect knife to have if you're going into a kitchen or if you're at home and you're doing a lot of utility stuff. It's a perfect knife for your bag. You don't have to worry so much about it. The price is right. It's definitely something you should have in your knife drawer. I think that this is a good price for a knife, for this type of knife. This is the kind of knife that you're gonna get a lot of life out of. And when you're at a party and someone's using it, you're not gonna freak out that it's gonna patina like this. This is awesome. You might not necessarily need something this expensive, but a knife like this will get you excited about cooking. This is a knife you kind of have to baby. However, you have to live your life. We can't just be, covering things up all the time. Live your life with this knife. 3,100 bucks? Let's do it. Come on, make some dinner. It's ridiculous. The thing is insane. This thing is all engine, no brakes. I love this knife, and if I had the money, right away. Right away. So after looking at all these knives, these are the 4 knives that are perfect for your kitchen. All 4 knives are much better than just getting a block of knives that might not be what you need. One thing I will say is just because some of them are expensive and some of them are inexpensive doesn't mean they're gonna make you a better cook. All these knives have great pros and cons, and you should feel confident in the type of knife that you get. That's kind of where you need to be. I'm with you.